I have to separate my work as a writer into two categories. Of course, obviously, comedy, for which I was known in the entertainment industry and in the book world up until the time I wrote The Exorcist. And as a matter of fact, consider myself a comedy writer.
Can you refresh us a little bit on that?
Well, A Shot in the Dark, The Man from the Diners Club, John Goldfarb, Please Come Home, What You Do in the War, Daddy, Promise or Anything. I mean, goes darlingly, goes on and on a little bit. Curiously enough, I wrote the novel, The Exorcist, because at that time, in the early, well, very late 60s, comedy had dried up in the movie business, and no one would hire me to write a non-comedic film. They said, Blatty, drama, stop. And so I set about to write The Exorcist then, because I'd always wanted to write it, but also I had nothing else to do, you see. I was not only as a comedy writer, but a writer of wild comedies, off-the-wall farce. But after The Exorcist, which I had expected would be the last work of that type that I would ever write, one and only perhaps, well, I recall distinctly a producer for whom I'd done a comedy once, great bank robber, pitched an idea at Paramount, wild comedy. They liked it. And they asked, who do you think should write? He said, well, this is perfect for Bill Blatty. And they said, Bill Blatty? Comedy? So the wheel had come full circle, and The Exorcist has completely obliterated the work in which I'm frankly most interested, in which are all the comic novels and films that I had done before The Exorcist. The theme that links my serious work is simply the search for God, which is hardly novel or new.
Has this been a personal search?
Well, of course, certainly. My faith has experienced wild vacillations ever since I was a boy, and it's a working out of, a lot of my work represents the working out of many personal problems of faith, which I think with the last novel, Legion, I finally settled the matter for myself.
In what way?
Well, I'm quite satisfied that there is not only a good God, but that the problem of evil admits of a solution. We don't have to get rid of a good God because we recognize that evil is woven into the pattern of the universe. It's not necessary. But I don't think I'd care to go into what one may find it in the pages of Legion, if you can find a copy anywhere.
Now, Legion and Exorcist 1990.
Yes, they are the same. Mm-hmm. However, I hasten to point out that the film Exorcist 1990 or Legion is a pure entertainment. And none of the serious themes of Legion are contained therein, nor should they be. Exorcist 1990 is what I find terrifying, which are creaks and shadows and what your own mind and imagination bring to the subject rather than spinning heads and all the rest, which I know have their place, but not in this film. With respect to the subject of possession itself, that I had to do a tremendous amount of research on the subject, largely in the Library of Congress, because exorcisms that are officially sanctioned by the Catholic Church, at least in America, I could find only 3 in the previous 50 years when I set out to research it. So it was the Library of Congress. And there was only one case in which the participants were living. I really don't want to talk about that. That's the victim in that case is very, very sensitive to The Exorcist and any publicity connecting The Exorcist with that person. Especially in the writing of comedy, I acutely felt that many times my work was not properly interpreted. Now, comedy is such an ephemeral thing. It isn't just a line that may be funny. the tone of voice, the raising of an eyebrow. Any number of things contribute to the moment. And it's very difficult for any two people to have the same vision of what is humorous and what will get a laugh. And so I decided to protect my material whenever I could. Of course, Ninth Configuration was not a comedy, although there were tremendous comedic elements in it. And Exorcist 1990 could, if it were crudely done, result in an embarrassment, I would think. Well, very, very often I have come to the set and looked at the pages and said, what was the writer thinking of? I mean, I can't shoot this material. And I've had to rewrite. And so I've gotten a certain understanding what some of the directors that I've worked with might have gone through. It's quite a humbling experience at times. It was very daring. It takes a lot of chances. If I'm going to make a mistake, I'd rather make it myself, thank you. I think that's what it comes down to. Well, the so-called paranormal is an area that's always interested me since very early childhood, I'd say. No, because if you're searching for God, and when I say searching for God, what you're really searching for is some validation of your own immortality, isn't it? That death is not a final ending.
The original Exorcist, the original film, The Exorcist, if you recall, ended with a priest who performed the exorcism diving out of the window of the bedroom. Our film, The Exorcist 1990, the sequel to this original film of 15 years ago or thereabouts, shows a priest diving through the window, and then it shows the stairs with the priest going down the stairs. Where the original Exorcist film ended is where the sequel, The Exorcist 1990, that's where it begins.
It was filmed on some very famous stairs, wasn't it?
Most certainly. Georgetown University. You know, I should know this, but I call them the back stairs because they're on the south side of the university, and they go on down to that road that parallels the Potomac River. They're very long and very narrow, and they're very hard when you fall down them.
And they kind of like lead up into nowhere, don't they? I mean,
yes.
You're talking about the image you had of them looking up at them.
By the way, I want you to know that I'm a movie buff, and I am a sucker for the story. Before we began shooting, I'd say approximately maybe a month before we began shooting at Georgetown University, I happened to be over in Washington, and I drove the same way I used to drive when I was a college student at the University of Maryland. I always used to go into Georgetown University through what I call the back way, which takes you right by these stairs. I stopped my car, and I looked up the stairs, and these stairs seemed to go up, 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 and just into nowhere. So you could let your imagination, and it was at night. So I mean, it's not very well lit, and the stairs look evil. There's something up there, whatever that is, if you let your imagination loose.
I would guess many have gone to the top of those stairs and wondered about things, because that was such a wild scene that's left so much in people's minds.
This is my daughter. Hello. This is Kaya.
Hi. Very happy to meet you.
I'm the writer of
Friday night, I was ready to go on the radio, and someone called me, a very nice lady, and said she was having dinner with Mr. Blatty, and they suddenly had an idea that he'd like to use Larry King in a scene in a restaurant to establish the Washingtonian flavor of this. Can you be here Monday? And I said, well, I got a book signing over at the Booksellers Convention. I'm going to New York tomorrow. Well, what time? We'll make it at your convenience. No filmmaker ever makes it at my convenience. So I said 3 o'clock. So I got here at 2:30, and it's 4 o'clock. So it was at the convenience of no one. But I'm here because I'm going to do a scene, and I love The Exorcist one, and I'm kind of getting a hoot out of this. I've done a few movies. It's kick. I've done a lot of interviews. I knew Dr. Rhine, who invented the term parapsychology. I've interviewed many priests, many religious leaders, people who've talked about exorcism, but by interest, I've never believed it. You know, that the truest thing, I'll give you an example here. I'll use just this little bottle. It could be anything. But all these parapsychologists and Dr. Rhine, who, by the way, told me that there are a lot of frauds in the field. Jackie Gleason did a wonderful thing with me once. He just took a little thimble thing like this. He looked like this. And he said, all right, I'll give $100,000 cash to anyone who, not touching this, can move it. Now, if you can move this thing, I'll give you $100,000. He's never met a soul who could do it. So we have all these mind-altering, mind-acting, but no one can move a bottle. And as long as you can't do that, I tend to think that the whole field is a fraud. It's a crock, but it's wonderful crock. I mean, it's fun crock. And no, I love the movie. You know, a woman turning around and evil spirits taking over. I've never seen a spirit. I've never had strange people, voices talk to me. I've never seen anyone come back from the dead. I was in the hospital for major surgery. Nobody came and talked to me. I didn't see myself. They gave me the anesthesia. I went to sleep. If I never woke up, I wouldn't be here. I woke up. That's a Brooklyn Boys Jewish practical look at the world of demonology.
I'm C. Everett Koop, the Surgeon General of the United States. I've made 5 documentary films. I've had a lot to do with little bits and pieces of others. And of course, in this job, I've been on television an awful lot, which from where I stand looks like the movies. I was on my way back from Boston, and my book agent called me and asked me if I would be willing to do this because they're looking for someone who was recognizable, and they wanted to authenticate a shot in a movie to make it look like Washington with real people. Well, in this film, I played myself. I just sat there and talked to a priest, and we had a nice chat. The coffee was cold and the service was poor, but we had a very, very good chat. We've had, in my tenure, 3 complaints from different parts of the country about satanic activity that they thought might be endangering the health of children and so on. We've investigated those, never have been able to come up with anything that was provable. And although I don't like the term where there's smoke, there's fire, there was an awful lot of smoke about these things. I've been involved enough with police cases to know that satanic worship does exist in this country and that animal sacrifice takes place and that it is a problem in many parts of the country and certainly in the United Kingdom. So that's real. When you talk about the relationship between the mind and the body, there is no doubt about the fact that it exists. We know in medicine that the mind does affect the body. We know that the body does affect the mind. And that's the whole field of psychosomatic medicine. Well established scientifically, I don't think anybody doubts that. But then there are other mind and body relationships that get off into the occult. And that, I think, requires a lot more investigation before I'd want to say anything about it.
Ed, who's the character you play in Exorcist 1990?
Father Dyer. Father Dyer, he's, if you remember at the end of the Exorcist, he's the last priest you see at the end, and then he and Kinderman, George Scott's part, is they become tight buddies right at the end of that, and so that carries on into Exorcist 1990. So he and Dyer and Kinderman have a great relationship going. They're putting each other on all the time, you know, and it's just trying to help each other out of the difficulties and the strain and the unhappiness and the sadness. They're constantly joking with each other, you know, but underneath, of course, there's a great deal of pain. But, so they're pals.
What is the basis for that pain?
Well, Father Karras and what happened during the exorcism, and now Kinderman, strange things are happening now again, so they're relating that to their relationship. I think is pretty well founded on the prior grief, and then now what's coming again. See, so I think they both know here we go again. You know, and, they're buddies.
You know, Father, you mentioned the Damien Karras in your prayer for the dead.
Yes, I did.
Father, isn't he the one who died in a fall on those steps?
Yes, that's right, Tim. 15 years ago today.
You hear a lot of...
Philbin, get lost, will you?
All right, I am light.
He's, seems to be a somewhat unorthodox priest, isn't he, in his reading matter, his taste in food and
Well,
lifestyle?
no, not really. I mean, I think we tend to, like we do most things, put people in a box, you know, so to speak, no pun intended, but the Jesuits are the Jesuits, you know, they're the military arm, and they are the ones who can, if they showed up at the Vatican and knocked on the door, they'd have to let them in. I mean, it's, you know, that's, so they are the elite, you know, and more latitude, I think. But Dyer's style is human, but his faith is real. So, you know, he's not hurting anyone for sure. But he is, he does have his whims, yeah.
What are some of those whims?
Well, he just, a sense of humor. I mean, it's, which is perspective, you know. I'm a man that can hold 3 or 4 arguments in his head at the same time. It seems to me intelligence. You're going to laugh at one of them, but we do have this mind that keeps kicking in and out all kinds of things, and I think that's where Dyer comes from. He's hanging on to his humor. He's not hurting anyone, and I think we're at our best when we're laughing, you know, or smiling anyway. And I think he's well aware of that. Yeah.
What did you say to him? Jesus loves you. Everyone else thinks you're an asshole.
Father President.
Good morning, John.
Backache.
Do we really have to have our own Olympics?
Any plans today, Joe?
This afternoon, I'm at the Flicks. It's a Wonderful Life.
Very nice.
Seen it 37 times.
That's commendable.
Do you have a favorite picture?
The Fly. You're going alone or with the usual keepers?
I'm taking Bill Kinderman with me.
The cop?
Yeah. Yeah, every year on this day he gets depressed, so I try to cheer him up.
Had you worked before with George C. Scott?
No.
Did you know him?
No, we met a couple times. Yeah, I was doing Moon for the Misbegotten in New York. And George came by, we sat down and talked about the world for a while. Then I saw him again, oh gosh, maybe 7 or 8 years ago. We were in the theater going to see a play in LA, and we said hi and talked, but I don't know him much at all, no.
Now, in the film you play friends of 15, 20 years standing. How do you develop that kind of sense with another actor so the audience says, oh, these guys have to be dearest friends for 20 years?
Well, I think with George, it's pretty easy because I really respect the fella, you know, I mean, as a man and as an actor. And I think we've both been at it long enough so we don't have to study a relationship, you know what I mean? I think we both know and remember our mistakes in the theater and all those things that happen when you're in the theater. So I think probably the root between George and I would be our experience, yeah. Blatty and George and I sat in the office over there before we started shooting and just threw it around and told old war stories, like I said, you know. And George has some beauties, by the way, that you won't hear today. So we just, I think what it does is a mutual respect, I hope. You know, that's, I think, the root of it. So that when we sit down, I think both people know that no one's going to try any acting tricks or any of that stuff. Let's just sit down and try to complement what Bill wrote. You see, that's why we're there. And, of course, make it human. I think, frankly, and I don't know how Bill feels about it, but I feel this one is better than the first one. The way he's written it and the way it's compressed in a way. I think it's going to be better. I really do. I read it and I said, yowee, let's go. This is wonderful.
And scarier?
Oh yeah, I think so.
You have several dream sequences in this film.
Mm-hmm. One enormous one and very important one, yeah.
What happens in that sequence?
It's a dream of Kinderman's, my character, which is a combination flash forward, flash back. It's almost impossible to explain it. rationally, but how do you explain any dream rationally? It's beautifully written, and from what I'm told, I have not seen the dailies, looks wonderful.
Is there any unique challenge for an actor in acting in a dream sequence?
I think simplicity is very necessary, and a kind of nothing, of course, no matter what happens in one's dreams, you're always generally yourself, and anything insane or wild that occurs, you accept, don't we, when we dream? So whatever, you just try to be very natural, and whatever comes along, you take it, and I think that is necessary in the playing of it, yeah. Do you know what Macbeth is about? I'll tell you. It's a play about the numbing of the moral sense, I tell you. Well, he's a very kind of an old-line cop, very dependable, very steady, rather conservative chap. Not particularly religious or theological in any way. Thorough professional. Would a God who is good invent something like death? Plainly speaking, it's a lousy idea. It's not popular, Father. It's not a winner.
There you go, blaming God.
Who should I blame? Phil Rizzuto?
You wouldn't want to live forever.
Yes, I would.
No, you wouldn't. You'd get bored.
I have hobbies. In the meantime, we have cancer and mongoloid babies and murderers, monsters prowling the planet, even prowling this neighborhood, Father.
He also kind of links the two films, doesn't he?
That I don't know so well. I know the Cobb character was in the first one, but I don't know how important it was.
It's much more important, I suspect, than this one.
It's pivotal.
You mentioned that he experiences a number of body blows, a number of shocks. Can you tell us about any of them, keeping in mind that we control this tape, so if there's anything that shouldn't be said, we can, forgive me, exercise it.
Exercise it. Very good, very good. Well, there's a lot of, at last count, I think 6 bodies, something like that. Some decapitations, some eviscerations, that sort of stuff. So even being a professional police officer, he's pretty much assaulted by this kind of bizarre behavior. He experiences one body blow after another, one incredible shock after another. And the fact that the man maintains his sanity speaks well for his mental health to begin with. Let's say he goes through an awful lot, this poor guy.
Had you ever worked with Brad Dourif before?
No, never met him before. Very nice chap, very capable.
Is there any way to prepare for those kind of scenes? How do you prepare for that kind of a tough
Well, happily
scene?
or unhappily, however you want to look at it. As Gene Kerr would say, the snake had all the lines. Brad did all the talking, and I did all the listening and reacting. You prepare for that by paying attention, I suppose, to what the man is saying. And trying to, Kinnaman tries to discern whether or not what the man is saying makes any sense at all.
Now, I call that showmanship, Lieutenant. Then, of course, no one notices pearls before sun.
Oh, few boos from the gallery, I see.
Interesting, you both have done a good deal of directing. He teaches directing.
Is that right?
You didn't know at Columbia University.
I didn't know that.
Do you think that brings any added dimension to it, that you are both actors of stature and directors?
Well, any kind of experience you can achieve along the way can't but help, I would think, sure. Absolutely.
Now, as a director, you're working with a director who's basically a writer. Is it sometimes a challenge to work with the guy who wrote the words?
Yeah, I've done that a few times, and sometimes it works beautifully, sometimes it doesn't work so well. In this case, it's been a happy experience because Bill is the first person to blame the writer, you see. As the director, he can blame the writer. Therefore, we all feel free to blame the writer as well. We have a few giggles about that from time to time. Essentially, he knows the material so incredibly well and deeply that there is very little problem in discerning what's going on in his mind and what his dreams may be. I can't be a judge of that. He's a remarkable chap, Bill.
Now, you are an actor who's done a great deal of directing. Bill is a writer who's directing at this point. If you had a list of qualities it takes to be a good film director, what would you, or a good director in any medium, what would you say?
Well, patience, of course, is a great virtue in any walk of life. It certainly is in film directing. Some sort of reasonably good camera eye, I think, is required. Certain sense of timing and drama necessary, but Bill has that ingrained as a writer. Directing is essentially problem solving, no matter what medium it's in. So if you can meet situations as they come up and find your way through them, sometimes it gets very labyrinthine in filmmaking, you've done a good day's work. And if you can carry the arc of progression throughout the entire chaos of filmmaking and make some sense out of it all at the end, you've done an incredibly good job.
Rotate them 24 hours a day. On the disturbed ward, one man inside near the entry door, one man outside the door. I asked the Jesuits at Georgetown for the dental records of a Father Damien Karras.
I play Sergeant of Detectives, and I run around with George C. Scott, and we try to solve these satanic murders.
We've got an autopsy on the boy.
Yes.
Kintry didn't die from the decapitation. He was injected with a drug called succinylcholine. They use it in electroshock therapy. But injecting 10 milligrams for each 50 pounds of body weight causes immediate and total paralysis. The kid couldn't move or scream while the killer was nailing and cutting him up.
He was conscious.
Yes. He was fully aware. The drug attacks the respiratory system.
It's frustrating not knowing from whence these things come, but I'm sure he believes in the supernatural. It's just hard bringing logistics into it and making that work for you mentally. But spiritually, we all know that there are other forces that are about us all the time. So you can't, I don't think he disregards that at all. It's just trying to bring it into a logical scope. Strange thing happened before I came here. May 28th, I went to a burger stand in LA. Really famous burger stand. It was a man and a woman having lunch, what have you. Gentleman standing in front of them. This man got up and went into the restroom just before I did, 10 seconds before. There's no way out of the restroom. But he disappeared. And that was very strange. I told George about it, DiCenzo, as well as Scott. George C. Scott said, well, sounds like a job for Ghostbusters to me. He blew me off. So, but it was very strange.
He just vanished completely?
He did, it did. The floor was concrete. There's a window about maybe 6 by 8 feet. I mean, 6 by 8 inches, rather. And there was no other way out of there. I came back and talked to the cooks. And when I came out, they saw him go in just like I did. They said, you know, did the guy share the bathroom with you? Because it was a women's bathroom. Men's was out of order.
Well, they were talking on the set one day about skaters and roller skaters and ice skaters. And ice skater play a bit of amateur hockey, and I roller skated. So I said, well, I'd like to do it. And there were a couple of other people, and we sort of auditioned for it and I got the job. So it was a bit of, you know.
Have you ever been a clown before?
Never, never. No.
Did you design your own makeup?
No, they were taken from the Barnum and it was taken from the Barnum and Bailey clowns to design. But the costume was made by Dana Lyman. She designed it and made it at home over the weekend.
Now, what do you do when you're not roller skating and clowning?
I'm a production designer, and I'm a production designer on this film. My name is Leslie Dilley. Many times the sets that I build, and any art director for that matter, really are to create atmosphere as much as they are to be looked at. And by that I mean that when an actor walks on there, or an actress, and the director and the crew comes on, they should really feel as though they're in the place that you're supposed to be in. And this is why often you build a little bit more than's ever going to be seen on the camera, and certainly dress it a little bit more than it's going to be seen on the camera to create the feeling. And that's really important.
To help the actors?
To help the performances, yes. I couldn't, with all the interaction that was required in the script, get enough lengthy corridors into the stage. So what I did was quite a common art director trick, and that is to build a forced perspective length of corridor, which condenses any given length or chosen length into any given length that you have. It's worked out on a drawing board and projected back to points, and you set the camera at a certain height, and away you go. Well, as we go right to the edge, if you probably noticed, there was a set of double doors in front of them, which helps with the illusion. People can walk in and out of the double doors because there's about 6 or 8 feet of actual full-size set behind there to get people in and out. And what we try to do sometimes is use either children or smaller people in the background walking across, and in this case with little white coats on, pretending to be doctors.
Who are you? I am no one. Many. Are you Damien Karras?
You haven't any medical records for him, have you? No tedious fingerprints.
Are you Karras?
I am the Gemini killer, James Veneman.
Well, the character, Father Karras, fell out or was pushed out a window in Georgetown and died. The question was, did he commit suicide, or was he forced out the window by a demonic force? Well, you are dealing with demonic powers, which traditionally are not defined with a great deal of clarity. It is a kind of war between darkness and light, between the invisible and the visible. So there's no picture postcard detail or glossiness to the picture at all. No. Plus, it also gives it a dimension in terms of the lighting, which the story is, has a resonance that goes beyond the literal. And exorcism has always been a secret ritual of the Catholic Church, but its traditions go back beyond even the Catholic Church. The Egyptians recognized the existence of forces that defy human measurability and are destructive, demonic, and mysterious. And today, the mental sciences, psychology, psychiatry, seem to be bewildered, or at least confused and contradictory in their definitions of what would qualify for a profile of someone who is possessed. I don't know if there's a good God. I don't know if you can personify God according to our grid of morality and ethics. I believe there is a force that has created and is creating and shall create future pluperfect tense, this entire cosmos that we live in. To attribute to him human characteristics, I think, is where intellectually it becomes divisive. You know, you look at the Persian myth of Satan is that he was God's primary angel, Lucifer, the god of light, and one day God created human beings for whatever reason and wanted the angels to bow down to human beings. And all the other angels did, and Lucifer wouldn't, because he said, I only bow down to you. And God said, well, then you must go to hell. And again, that's a metaphorical explanation of something that is immeasurable and we are incapable of understanding. I mean, the agnostic has his faith, the atheist has his faith, as do the Christians and the Muslims. And how they answer the question of the unequivocal existence of evil is due to culture and their own particular religious upbringing. But nonetheless, I think most people know that if you have good, that there seems to be another balance over there that is evil. And how you distinguish between the two of them, centuries of theologians haven't figured out, so I'm sure centuries of scientists will never figure out either. It's wrapped in it's an enigma wrapped in a riddle, as the man said. One of the reasons I think that Bill has chosen to present the story in an almost pristine fashion without the obvious and commercial graphic depiction of the violence is to allow the audience to engage in the picture by exercising their own imagination, so that the picture of the violence is a creation of their own imagination. It is not a creation of the filmmakers, although the filmmakers probe it and suggest it, but never define it. You'll define it in your own mind, of what happened in the room, or what happened in the cell, or what happened in a dark, empty Georgetown street. So I think that is a brilliant means of engaging an audience, and keeps you away from the danger of the sensationalism.